The paper was still warm from the printer when Julian's mother handed it to me across the boardroom table, smiling like she was offering me a slice of cake instead of a resignation letter with my name already typed at the bottom. "It's cleaner this way," Corinne Ashworth said. "You step back from claims oversight, Julian steps up, and everyone keeps their dignity." I read it twice. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I set it down, thanked her for her time, and walked out of Kirchner Assurance Group's 10th floor conference room without a single word about what I'd found in the servers 3 nights earlier. She had no idea I already knew why the compliance officer kept a folder locked in his bottom drawer with my father's company seal stamped on the cover. My name is Vanessa Kirchner. I'm 34, and until that Tuesday in March, I was the director of claims oversight at the regional insurance brokerage my father, Desmond Kirchner, had spent 31 years building from a 2-desk office above a hardware store into one of the largest independent brokerages in the state. He handed me operational control the year I turned 30, trusting me the way he trusted no one else, not even himself some days. I married Julian Ashworth 6 years ago, and from the engagement dinner onward, his mother treated my father's company the way some people treat a family cabin nobody's using enough, a resource that should obviously be shared. "Julian has such a head for numbers," she'd say. "It would be a waste not to bring him closer to the real decisions." Over 4 years, one relative at a time, the Ashworth family found their way into departments that mattered. Julian's cousin Marcus became a senior claims adjuster. Corinne's nephew Preston landed in reinsurance placement. A woman named Yolanda, who I only later learned was Corinne's goddaughter, took over vendor payment approvals. My father approved every hire because I recommended them, and I recommended them because Julian brought me their resumes over dinner, framed as favors to family. I didn't think to question why so many surnames kept repeating. It started as a rounding error. A reinsurance certificate for a commercial property claim listed a carrier I'd never heard of. Some outfit called Meridian Assurance Partners registered out of a mail drop 2 states away. When I asked Marcus about it, he said it was a new partner Julian had brought on to diversify our reinsurance panel. I let it go. 3 months later, I noticed claims settlements on 4 unrelated policies routing through the same third-party adjustment firm, Holloway Claims Solutions, at settlement amounts nearly 20% above what our actuarial models projected. Why did the compliance officer already have a folder prepared on Holloway before I'd even asked him to look? I didn't confront anyone yet. I opened a private file on my home computer and started writing down dates. When I brought the pattern to Julian over dinner, gently, framing it as a curiosity rather than an accusation, he laughed and told me I was seeing conspiracies in spreadsheets. When I raised it again a month later, he turned cold, said I sounded ungrateful for everything his family had done to help the company grow into new markets. I stopped talking about it out loud entirely. Instead, I hired an independent forensic auditor named Priya Chandrasekaran, paid her from a personal account Julian didn't have access to, and met her twice a month in a diner outside the county line. What she found took 9 months to fully document. Meridian Assurance Partners wasn't a reinsurance carrier at all. It was a shell entity registered to an address that traced back to Corinne's second home. Holloway Claims Solutions was staffed almost entirely by people connected to the Ashworth family, and it had been inflating settlement payouts on manufactured or exaggerated claims, then kicking a percentage back through consulting invoices that Yolanda approved without a second signature. Over 4 years, the scheme had diverted just under $3 million out of the company's claims reserves, money that should have been sitting in trust for policyholders. I didn't tell Julian what I'd found. I filed for divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences, and I let Priya's report sit sealed with my attorney until the decree was final. Some people would call that cowardice. I call it timing. The moment I no longer had a husband whose family could claim any protected stake in my father's company, I could act without a single thread of guilt holding me back. Standing on the courthouse steps with the decree in my bag, I called my father. I told him everything: the shell reinsurer, the phantom adjustment firm, the consulting kickbacks Yolanda had waved through for years. I told him it was time to remove every Ashworth relative from the payroll. Effective that day, security escorting them out before the close of business. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Send me the report." Within an hour, our head of compliance had a name list. Within 3 hours, the terminations began. That evening, while I was still taping boxes shut in the apartment I'd moved into during the separation, Corinne showed up at my door. She had never once raised her voice at a family dinner in 6 years, but she was pounding hard enough that a neighbor's dog started barking 2 doors down. When I opened it, she was already shouting, demanding I reverse the terminations, warning me I had no idea what I'd just done to families who depended on those paychecks. I told her the only thing that had been starved was my father's claims reserve, slowly, deliberately, for 4 years, and that the forensic report sitting with my lawyer proved every dollar of it. Something in her face shifted then, just slightly, and I knew she understood I wasn't guessing. She tried softness next, telling me Julian still loved me, that this could all be quietly undone if I reinstated everyone and let the past stay in the past. I told her there was no version of that available to her anymore, that if she or Marcus or Preston or Yolanda wanted to contest their termination, they were welcome to do it in front of the state insurance commissioner, where the audit would become a public record. She stopped threatening lawsuits after that. I closed the door. The following weeks were harder than I expected, not because I doubted the decision, but because rebuilding an entire claims department from the ground up meant 12-hour days for months. My father brought in a sharp, unsentimental operations consultant named Rosalind Petrakis to help vet new hires and rebuild the reinsurance panel from licensed, verifiable carriers. Within 6 weeks, settlement ratios dropped back in line with our actuarial projections for the first time in years. My father called me most evenings that spring, sometimes just to read me the updated numbers, his voice a little lighter each time, like a man realizing a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. Julian called exactly once, 3 weeks after the confrontation with his mother. He didn't defend Corinne. He didn't defend the 4 relatives who'd lost their positions. He just asked how I was doing, and for a moment, the version of him I'd married showed through the version his family had spent years building over him. I told him I was doing better than I had in a long time, and I meant it. He didn't call again. The commissioner's office opened a formal inquiry into Halloway Claims Solutions once the forensic report was submitted as part of discovery in an unrelated licensing review Priya had flagged. Marcus and Preston relocated out of state within 2 months. Meridian Assurance Partners was dissolved before the fiscal year ended, presumably to bury the paper trail before regulators came looking too closely. My father chose not to pursue further criminal referral beyond what the commissioner's office required, telling me that watching them lose everything they'd built on stolen ground was enough for him, and that dragging the family name through headlines wouldn't return a dollar to the policyholders it belonged to. 6 months later, Kirshner Assurance Group posted its strongest quarterly loss ratios in company history, staffed entirely by people who had earned their positions on merit. My father named me president that spring, standing on the same warehouse floor where he'd started the company 3 decades earlier, telling the staff gathered that the business had finally been returned to the people who actually protected it. I think about that folder in the compliance officer's drawer sometimes, the one that existed before I even asked for it, proof that the truth had been sitting there the whole time, waiting for someone patient enough to open it. If you'd found that folder first, would you have opened it that same night? Or would you have waited, the way I did, until the proof was strong enough that no one could talk their way out of it?